can take a passive prospect to take an immediate action by turning a standard advertisement, for example, into an interactive mobile call to action. Today, we have Scott Chapin from one of our strategic partners, DigiKnow, presenting. Scott is the head of Circle44 Media unit of DigiKnow, and he will provide us with the ins and outs of QR codes. He will explain what they are, how to use them, how to develop them, and how to measure them. Circle44 is a mobile marketing agency that develops campaign systems and tools to connect people with ideas, products that are mobile technologies. And Circle44 Mobile has produced mobile applications for iPhones, iPads, Android environments, and from clients ranging from the industrial types like Rockwell to Nestle and the consumer side and the Cleveland Medical Mart. So with no further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you to Scott Chapin.
Thanks, John. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming today. We will try to keep this on topic, and definitely, as John mentioned, if you have questions, please post them in the questions box that's in the GoToMeeting client, and we will try to address them at the end of the seminar. The UPC code is one of the original barcodes, and it's been around for quite a long time. I'm sure everyone's familiar with them. You see them on every product that we buy at Walmart or grocery store today. It was developed originally in 1974 by National Cash Register down near Dayton, Ohio. The very first product that was ever scanned with a UPC code was a package of Juicy Fruit gum at a Marsh grocery store down near Dayton. A lot has changed over 20 years beyond that, and in 1994, the QR code was born in Japan, created by a division of Toyota called Denso Wave. They were not creating this for a consumer product initially, but they were using it within manufacturing to see and track different packaging and different products through their assembly line. Today, Denso is still one of the leaders within QR, and they're always innovating in that area. They're coming out with some new products even this year, but you don't hear a lot about them because QR codes have become so prolific that sometimes you forget what the history there is. A little bit about QR codes. For anyone that hasn't seen some of the stats, the use of QR codes has just taken off tremendously. This stat from just late last year, 1,200% increase in scanning between June and December. So over a 6-month period, 12 times as many people scanned QR codes as had done in the previous 6 months. And that number is just astronomical, and it's been even on the rise more rapidly this year. 52% of Americans say they remember seeing a QR code. And just from my own experience, one of the things I see is that a lot of people don't know what a QR code is until you tell them, oh, this is a QR code, this box with the little dots on it, and then they realize, oh, I've been seeing those everywhere. Or in some cases, that you really start to see them once you know to look for them. Just in today's newspaper here in Cleveland, I saw several of them with different advertising. So they're really everywhere, and we're just going to keep seeing more and more of them. 28% of Americans have actually scanned a QR code, which I think that's an even more important number. Awareness is great, but actual interaction with the QR codes is really what's important. 28% is not quite a critical mass, but we're definitely getting there. And I'm sure when we see surveys at the end of this year, numbers will be closer to 40 or 50% of people who have actually scanned QR codes. And the final number here is that 60% have scanned and then scanned again. And that's what really makes QR codes powerful, is that it's not a one-time interaction. Once you've gone through and downloaded a QR code reader, you're much more likely to scan and scan again. So we'll talk about this in a few minutes here, but situations where you have multiple scanning opportunities are really where QR codes are the best kind of situations. One of the challenges today is that there are a lot of different QR codes, or really there are a lot of different 2D barcodes. I actually slipped on that one. 2D barcode is the generic term for any barcode that has data in 2 dimensions. A standard UPC code is a 1D barcode because the lines of information only run vertically. In a 2D barcode, Lines can run vertically and horizontally, and even in the example of the Microsoft tag there on screen, you don't even necessarily need lines, but this is still considered a 2D barcode. So one of the challenges today is to pick a platform and to pick a technology for the barcodes, and there are a lot of competing technologies out there right now. The ones I have on screen here are definitely the four most popular today, but QR code by far is taking over the market quickly. Microsoft is probably the second place in that overall market, and ScanLife is kind of pulling up the rear there. Data matrix is used much more for the production, assembly, operation side of things. You may see those on packages, but they're not targeted at consumers. They're really something that was held over from a manufacturing standpoint. So the difference between these barcodes is important, and I want to talk a little bit about that here so that you have an idea of what the difference is and when you might use one over another. As I said before, QR is definitely the most popular standard today, and when you're talking about 2D barcodes, one of the very important things is picking a barcode that a reader is already installed on the user's phone. So with QR codes, there are hundreds of readers in the iPhone or the iTunes and Android and BlackBerry markets. So a lot of people already have those installed, which is one of the reasons it's kind of a circular thing. More people have them installed, so more people use them, so more people install the reader, so more people use them. And it's really helped QR to move quickly to the front of the pack. QR is also a free technology. It's an ISO standard, and there's lots of sites that can provide QR codes. So that's another serious advantage to the QR platform. Microsoft Tag, on the other hand, is much more proprietary, but it has some advantages over QR. The Microsoft Tag is a color tag, so it can be done in two-color, black and white, or the multicolor, as you see on the screen right now. Those are both ways that the Microsoft Tag can be displayed, so that adds a little additional element to an advertisement. The big advantage of a Microsoft Tag is that after you create it and put it in a print publication, you can go and edit the destination of the QR or the 2D barcode after the fact. ScanLife, much like the Microsoft Tag, is proprietary, and you can do some of the modifications like that. So why use a QR code over the other technologies? I talked a little bit about some of those on the last slide, but really it comes down to four things. They're very easy to implement. There are, again, hundreds of websites online where you can generate a QR code. They really make engaging print interactive possible in ways that really wasn't possible before. We've definitely been putting URLs in advertising for many years, but what a QR code lets you do is you really get into the detail, get into a long URL. If you wanted to link someone to a YouTube video or a deep page on your mobile website, a lot of different things are possible with a QR code that really you just don't want to do in a print ad when someone has to type in the URL. The look and feel of a QR code is still pretty novel, and including that within your ad can definitely give you a high-tech feel where maybe you didn't have one previously. So it can be used to enhance your brand itself when it's used in a print piece, because it still shows some tech savviness and kind of gets you more engaged with the end user. And ultimately, as the last bullet there says, QR codes are free. That is a very good reason to use them within marketing because there's really no additional cost. If you're already doing a full-page ad and you have a video that's on YouTube that you want to share, combining the ad with the QR code with your YouTube video is a great way that really adds no cost to your overall advertising budget to get someone to that video and, again, show some of your tech savviness. A couple examples of companies that are using 2D barcodes. Kinepex is one, a client of Sonnhalter's that is using the 2D barcode. In this case, it's a Microsoft Tag to take folks to videos on YouTube that explain further what the product can do and more about the company. Using a barcode to take someone to a video is a great use of a 2D barcode, and I definitely highly recommend that. Another interesting use is trade show environments. And there's a lot of different ways this can be used. In this case, Quantum used barcodes on all of their literature folders at a trade show. So the print literature was there in a fairly traditional way, but all of them had a 2D barcode on them that could be scanned, and you could get a digital version of that print, either brochure, sell sheet, flyer, sent to you or view it immediately as a PDF on your phone. So, when you're at a trade show and you're collecting lots of papers and they get, put in your bag and sometimes get lost, having a digital version of that you can look at back when you're at the office or when you're home later in the day or even the hotel, or having an email in your inbox that reminds you to look at this information is a great way to take someone from the print side, the physical world, into the digital world. Additionally, what you can do with a QR code when you're taking someone to the website is encourage them to register. So not only are you delivering them information digitally, which has no substantial monetary cost to it, but you can also get users to register and sign up for email newsletters, product information, whatever that might be, and really get a whole new level of information that you wouldn't have got when someone just walked up and grabbed a physical piece of literature. Southwire is another one who's used QR codes in advertising. Again, they're taking folks to their testimonial videos on YouTube, letting them see more about their products, more about how they're being used to innovate the cable and electrical cable industry. So QR codes is a great way for Southwire, who's already kind of a high-tech company, to get that additional high-tech feel and leverage the technology to get information to folks that may not have been interested in going to southwire.com to find more information. In Cleveland, QR codes are popping up everywhere through the Downtown Cleveland Alliance. The DCA is a B2B and B2C organization who promotes businesses within Cleveland. They're using QR codes in their advertising, both in magazines and in the newspaper, as well as putting QR codes on buildings downtown. So you may see a QR code and scan it and get a menu for a restaurant that you're interested in, or information about the services that are offered. For areas that have a lot of foot traffic, QR codes are a great way to learn more about the businesses, especially if you're in a place with foot traffic where the business might not be open. So if you're a B2B company in downtown Cleveland and you want to tell somebody what your services are, putting a QR code in your window can let somebody link to your mobile website and find out more information at the hours that you're not there necessarily to answer their questions. Another example of a Sonnhalter client is Snowdog, and they're again using the Microsoft tag to help people to find out more information about their products. So again, this is a great way to get people from the print to the digital, get them information, video, registration, a lot of things that aren't possible in a print ad and really didn't happen that much when somebody had to go and type in the URL to get to a website. So those are all some examples of places where QR code has been applied. One important thing is determining if QR codes are right for you. One of the biggest things you need to consider is, do you have content that's mobile friendly? Because QR codes are primarily scanned from a mobile device, a phone or even a tablet. And if you don't have content that's mobile friendly, you may end up disappointing the user when they scan the barcode and are taken to a page that doesn't really render well on their phone. So having mobile content is very important, and that can be things like PDFs or YouTube videos or a mobile-friendly web page. All of those are great ways to pay off a QR code. The second question is, does the consumer that you're targeting have a smartphone? Now, a lot of us in the marketing and technology world think, well, everyone has a smartphone today. But there are definitely segments of the audience where smartphones are not as popular as they are even in mainstream. So thinking about your audience and whether they have a smartphone is a very important piece, because and when I say smartphone, I mean generally iPhone and Android, but sometimes that can also, some of the BlackBerries as well can scan QR codes, and even some feature phones can scan QR codes as well. but it's often hard to deliver the content that you want to deliver on some of the less feature-rich phones like an iPhone or an Android phone. And the last thing, as I mentioned earlier, one of the important things about QR is, are you in a situation where there's lots of opportunities to scan? Because one of the high challenges within QR codes and 2D barcodes in general is having the reader on your phone. Currently, phones don't come with a QR code reader installed, so you need to encourage the user to go and get a reader if they didn't install one on their own. So if I'm in a situation where I've never seen a QR code, but I know what it is and I realize I have to install software on my phone, I want to be in an opportunity to do multiple scans so I can really pay off that effort. Great example of this was at a trade show that I saw. Chevrolet was promoting their new Chevy Cruze, and they put QR codes all over the car. So there were probably 10 or 15 QR codes, and if you scan the tire, it would tell you about the advantage that the tire brings. If you scan the door handle, it will tell you about the locking system. If you scan the QR code on the hood, it would tell you about the engine. So it was a great way to engage and to learn more about, the car itself. But even if you didn't have a QR code reader installed, by the time, the minute it took to do that, they really paid it off well and gave you a lot of opportunity to use the new software that you had just installed. So those are three very important things to consider when you're thinking about whether a QR program is right for you. The second step within it is really developing strong content. Again, throughout this I've been talking about how you pay off the QR code. And actually this picture here, I forgot about it, is actually the Chevy ad and program from that trade show. Really, again, it's paying off the content well. It's having content that's either video or mobile friendly, or even a PDF that shows up well on mobile. It could be a registration form, a lot of things like that. But keep in mind that how someone is going to be engaging with the content is through a phone. So you don't want to have something that's too slow to download, or a video that's really long that someone might not have the attention span when they're on their phone. So think about that in a lot of different ways as you think about a QR code program. And then the third step is really to generate the code itself. And this is a very easy process, but there are some ways you can do this to get better information and to create barcodes that are easier to use. So the first step is to identify your target. Whatever URL you want to link someone to, whether it's on your mobile website or on YouTube or wherever that may be, find out the URL you want to link to and start with that. The second step I strongly recommend is adding some campaign tracking to it. And if you do any banner advertising, you're probably familiar with campaign tracking that's provided by Google Analytics or Omniture or any of the other analytics providers, where you can actually put in IDs that track back to the source so that when someone came to your website, they came in from a QR code scan. So what happens with all of that information together is you end up with a very, very long URL. And one of the challenges with QR codes is the URL length dictates how big the QR code has to be, because you're embedding a lot of information in the code. So one of the things we suggest to our clients is that you use a URL shortener like a bit.ly or an owly, or in our case we have our own URL shortener that we use, Circle44.me, that creates short URLs. And what this does is it lets you take the very long URL, including the campaign tracking, and put it into a 13 or 14 character URL that can then be embedded in a QR code. And what that lets you do, again, is make the QR code smaller because you're not embedding nearly as much data within the code. And then finally is actually generating the code itself. If you go to Google and search for QR code generator, you'll get tens of thousands of search results, and the first one or two there are always good sources for that. There are a lot of different places that will generate the QR code for you. But basically you just paste in the short URL that you created, and it will spit out a QR code that can be embedded in an ad or printed and hung in a window, or however you might want to use it. Finally, you deploy and measure, and this is always a very important step. Making sure that you've tested your QR code before it goes into the market is very important. tested by scanning it with several applications on several different platforms if you can. So using a couple readers on iPhone, a couple readers on Android. If you have a BlackBerry reader, use that as well. And make sure it works across all the mediums or all the platforms. One of the challenges sometimes is keeping in mind how it's being printed. If you're in a glossy magazine, the QR code will come across very sharp, and generally you don't have to worry too much about it. But if you're going to be putting it in a newspaper, which has a much lower print resolution, you need to make sure that you've tested or worked with the newspaper to make sure that the QR code is going to scan properly. And the newspapers and publishers can all provide you their recommendations as far as resolution and size of QR code that works well within their publications. Once your QR code's in the market, because we put campaign tracking in it, you can then go into Google Analytics or Omniture and see how the scans are coming in. Once again, a newspaper or magazine hits the stands, you can then go in and see how many people are scanning each day and what they're doing on the site or with the information once they've collected it. So QR codes are great, and they're really doing a lot of things, but I did want to talk a little bit about what's next from an interactive perspective, and specifically how we can engage the physical world through advertising or through on-site to the technology world. And two ways that I think are going to also, I guess for lack of a better word, compete with QR codes are text messaging, which is obviously very popular, and also near-field communications. So text messaging is also a great way to engage with consumers and in a B2B space by putting a text message or a text code, an SMS code within your ads. You can have someone send in a name or a keyword and then respond back to them with a URL or have them opt into future communications. So text messaging is a great way to create a two-way communication in the digital space, but activated from the physical print space. Text messaging is by far the most highest penetration of any of the mobile technologies. Last I saw, I believe 95% of phones, all phones in the United States have text messaging capability. So that is by far the greatest audience reach method that's out there right now to get someone to connect with you on the phone. The other technology I would mention, near-field communications, or NFC, is something that you're going to be seeing more about in the coming years. If you're familiar with the MasterCard PayPass or some of the other technologies where you can tap your credit card to pay without even having to swipe, it's a similar technology to that, but what you'll be able to do is actually tap your phone to pay, and it will automatically charge your credit card or your gift card or whatever might be loaded within your phone. This technology is already taking off in Japan and is starting up in Asia, and we're going to be seeing more and more of that even in 2011 here in the United States. Google, Chase, and I think it's MasterCard have all partnered together to really push this forward in the United States. So you're going to be seeing, they're going to be doing some real market tests in both New York and San Francisco later this year, and we're going to be seeing more and more of this technology in both embedded in phones and available at point of sale. But it's not just for a point of sale. You could also use near-field communications for scanning products in a warehouse or interacting with other things from a digital perspective. I don't think that NFC is going to replace QR because putting an NFC chip in a print ad is just going to be too costly. So I think using QR to activate print is definitely going to be a great way to go for the coming months and years. But NFC is definitely something that you should be aware of, and I just wanted to share it today so that you could see a little bit about what's coming from that aspect. Before we get into questions, I wanted to kind of show one other section about QR codes, because this is interesting from a marketing and branding perspective. QR codes have error correction built in them that allows you to obscure up to 30% of the barcode with a logo or some other emblem and still successfully scan the barcode. So the code we have on screen right now is a valid code that will take you to the Circle44 Mobile website. if you scan it with your phone right now if you have a reader. So even though I've put our 44 logo in the middle of it there, this is still a valid and scannable barcode. So again, it's a fun little way to, spice up the QR code and make it a little more interesting. It's also a bit surprising to some folks that this actually works. So it encourages engagement, because some people are like surprised and will say, well, that's not going to work. Let me check. It does work, and now you've gotten them to your mobile website or to your video. A couple more extreme examples of this. Louis Vuitton Japan did this very complicated QR code with some Japanese anime kind of character there, the little panda. This is actually a valid QR code. If you scan this with your phone, it will take you to their website. This is by far one of the most artistic, interpretive QR I have seen in my 2 years of interacting with QR codes. So I'm doubting that any of you are going to jump on this one real quickly, but I wanted to kind of share it because it's just a fun one that I found on the internet. A couple others more domestically here. Macy's took their Macy's star and embedded a QR code within it, and then used just a random bit pattern around it to kind of extend the look. So this is a great way to, they're really not modifying the QR code because the information is surrounding it instead of within it. But it was a great way to engage with that, and a good way to kind of show off, again, what's possible with the QR code. So that's a brief overview of the world of QR code, and definitely, trying to focus on how that works within the B2B space. I would love to answer any questions you might have. So if you could post them within the questions box, John and I will moderate those here, and we will answer as many questions as we can in the next few minutes here. So I'll give you a second to populate those. Oh, I see we've got a couple in here already. One of the first questions here is, what specs are required for a QR code? And the short answer is that they change depending on a lot of factors. So there's no immediate answer I can give you for that. But a couple things to keep in mind. One, when you're doing a QR code, you need to keep what they call a safety zone around the code. Let me actually go back a screen here in the presentation. You'll see within this Macy's ad, there's a white box around the QR code, and it doesn't bleed straight into the points on the star. That white box is a safety zone that allows the QR reader to know this is the edge of the code, because a QR code is a very well-defined box, and you'll always see the QR code with the 3 big squares in the corner, and there's a little square that's kind of in the lower right but slightly centered area. So those are standard features of a QR code, and just as well the line around it, the safety zone is as well. But as far as how large the QR code has to be when you're printing it, depends on 2 primary factors. One is the amount of data that you're putting in the QR code, and so this is why we recommend using a URL shortener to create a smaller URL which lets you generate a smaller QR code. You can always make it bigger if you want to, but there is a minimum size that it needs to be so that it can read. And the second factor having to do with that minimum size is your print resolution. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but if you're doing this within a newspaper, you need to have a physically larger QR code than you can get away with in a glossy magazine that's printing at 300, 600 dpi. Because the resolution of print and the edges are just a little fuzzier, and if you make that QR code too small, the little boxes can blur together, making the code unscannable. So those are some of the factors within it. Again, definitely if you have specific questions about a use, I will put my email up again at the end of this, and you can reach out to John or to me, and we can give you more specifics on that. But as a general rule of thumb, if you want to make it smaller, you need to have high resolution printing and a short URL. Let me go on to another question here. The question here is, my QR reader is free from iTunes. When creating a QR code, it's not possible to do it from a PDF. Is it possible to generate a code for a PDF? The answer to that is yes. You can definitely generate a code that will link to a PDF. A QR code can link to any URL, and QR codes can actually link to things other than URLs. You can put in a phone number or even contact information. A URL is by far the most commonly used destination for a QR code, but you could really put anything in there. So if you have a URL to a PDF that is visible in your browser, you can then use that within the QR code generator. So again, take the URL from your browser, generate a short code that goes with that URL, and then create a QR code from that short URL, allowing you to make a smaller size QR code for putting into a print publication. I hope that answers your question there. Let's see, I think it was John. So if it didn't, please chime in again here. Let me see if I can get these a little bigger. Let's see. Here's a question about QR codes and changing the links in them. I mentioned earlier that with a Microsoft tag, you're able to change the destination of the tag after the fact. So even if you've generated a Microsoft tag and 6 months later you want to change where that information or that scan goes from a print publication, then you can easily do that through the Microsoft web interface. Although this is possible with QR codes, it's not quite as simple. With QR codes you cannot edit the URL. It's actually embedded and the data is actually in the QR code. So what we do to work around that is we use a short URL generator that does allow us to edit that content later. So if you go to c44.me/Scott, that will take you to my mobile profile. But if next week I need to change where that goes, I can change the redirect of the c44.me/Scott. Instead of going to Circle44/profile/Scott Chapin, I could change that to go to youtube.com/ the name of my video. So I can change that after the fact based on using the way we've generated short codes. So again, if you're interested in doing that and you think it's a case where you're going to be editing things regularly, something that we probably talk about, it's a little easier to get into the details of that in a direct conversation rather than over on the email or on the webinar here today. Let me pick another question out of the list here. Somebody asked for more information here about tracking codes to a QR code. Again, it's pretty similar to the way you would track a campaign if you were doing banner advertising online. If you're using Google Analytics or another analytics provider, they have built-in systems to actually generate what I call campaign tracking. And what you can do is then put that campaign tracking into your QR code, and then you'll actually find out every time somebody scans it, it will say, this came in from campaign, QR advertising. Let's say that's what we called it. So that's the best way to handle that, is to use the existing tracking mechanisms within your analytics system to handle that. If you're linking to YouTube or other places of content that you don't control quite as well, there are other ways to track that. But again, that's probably a little more than I can get into in the webinar here. Let me see, another question here. Let's see, a question here about copyrighted material, and if you link a QR code over to a manufacturer spec sheet, and I assume this question is saying that you're not the manufacturer. I would strongly suggest you to talk to the folks that you're going to be linking to. If you're a distributor channel for them, I'm assuming they would have no issue with you linking over to that, but that's definitely on a case-by-case basis. It really depends on how you're presenting the content as well. If you're presenting it as their content that you're linking to, that's much more likely to be approved than if you're not intentionally but even accidentally presenting the content as your own content, and the user may not be aware that they've gone to a manufacturer's website. I'm definitely not a lawyer and don't want to give legal advice on this webinar, but just from my own personal experience, I'd say the best solution to that is ask. I think every time we've tried to do something like that, we've generally been given permission to do so. Again, I've never really linked to spec sheets, things like that, but I'm thinking more on the video side of things. So definitely ask, and not a situation where you should act first and ask for forgiveness later. Definitely ask for permission first, and get their legal approval before you link to some content that's not your own. Question here about QR codes at as a game at trade shows. Trade shows are definitely a great environment to use QR codes within. Again, we talked about a couple examples of that with the trade show literature folders with QR codes on them, and the Chevy Cruze with QR codes plastered all around it. As far as doing a game at a trade show, you could definitely, and I've actually seen this done not at a trade show, but at an event that I was at, use QR codes as a scavenger hunt. So what happened in the event that I was at was that QR codes were used as a scavenger hunt. In this case, it was to promote interaction between the attendees. Everyone had a QR code on their badge that was part of this game. They would scan the QR code to get information to answer. I think there were 5 or 6 questions that everyone was given. So you scan the QR code, which would take you to either a video or a mobile website with some information. You would then, in that information, you would get the answer to a little quiz question. And in this case, whoever answered the quiz question, all 6 of the questions first, I believe they got a $50 Starbucks gift card or something like that. So that was a great way to promote interaction. In this case, it was socially. But if you have a large trade show booth, or if you're a sponsor of a trade show and you want to get folks to move around the show, putting QR codes all over the place and having people either need to scan them to earn points, or scan them to get more information, or scan them to complete a game or quiz, that's definitely a very doable thing and a great way to to create physical movement around the trade show. Somebody's asking about what QR code reader is best on the platforms. On screen now I have a URL for getqr.net. This is a redirect that Circle44 set up for our clients because I get this question very often. It redirects you to a website for a product called iNigma. That's my preferred QR code scanner for iPhone, Android, and BlackBerry. Their reader also does run on some feature phones. I don't know which ones off the top of my head, but definitely it even runs on some non-smartphones. So I would suggest going to that, and that will just redirect you to their site, which will then take you to the App Store. But that's the one I use for myself. But there are literally hundreds of QR code scanners within each of the app stores. So each one has a little bit of a different feature. Some of them, keep a history of things you've scanned so you can remember what you've scanned to. Some of them will integrate with Google search results. Even on Android, Google Goggles, Google's image scanning app will also scan QR codes. So there's a lot of different software. Again, I put up the getqr.net because it's easy, but there are quite literally hundreds of QR code scanners. So there's not necessarily one that's better or worse. They all have their pros and cons to them. Let's see. Somebody's asking a little bit more about the QR code modification that I showed, with our own Circle44 logo or other logos. There's 2 questions actually. One question is, does it matter which 30% of the code gets destroyed? and the other one is kind of how you would go about this. So I'll try to answer those two together. It does matter which part of the QR code is covered. You can't ever cover up the 3 very large squares or the 4th not quite as large square in the lower right center. Those are all positioning markers, and if those get covered up, the code won't scan anymore. So generally, folks will center whatever logo they're trying to put in within a QR code, only because, I mean, you could put it in the left or another corner, but generally you'll see it in the center. And the second part of the question is, how do you actually go about doing that? And the process for generating the QR code is really no different. And then all you need to do is overlay your logo or whatever it might be with a little bit of again, a safety circle around it. Let me go back up to the screen here that had the Circle44 logo on it. You'll see the logo here has a white circle around it. So I didn't bleed the orange edge of the Circle44 all the way into the QR code data pixels itself. I did separate that a little bit so that, again, the scanner knows that this is the edge of usable information and it can ignore what's within that. I talked about test, test, test when you're doing QR codes in general. I can't say test enough times when you're modifying a QR code because there's a lot of different readers and they're not all quite as standard-based as other ones. So again, if you're going to modify your QR code and try to put your logo in it, make sure you test it thoroughly. And again, that's, when we're working with our clients, I probably have 10 different phones that I test things on, phones and tablets together. So, that's an extreme case, but that's just an example of, how thorough it is beneficial to be. Because once you've put it in a magazine and that hits the press, as much as we love pulling things back and changing it in the digital world, there's no way to, undo that. So you don't want to go out to market with something that hasn't been thoroughly tested. Let me look for 1 or 2 more questions here, and we'll try to wrap this up here. Let's see. There's another question about the tracking that QR code gets. Question is about what information do you get when you're putting in the tracking. What you get is acknowledgement of where the visitor to your website came from. So you're not necessarily getting information about the user or their phone. You're not getting any personally identifiable information about the user. If you're interested in getting that information from somebody scanning a QR code, you need to have a registration on the mobile site that you're linking to with the QR code. So you need to actually ask for that information separately. A website cannot read your phone's number or your email address or any identifiable information. You need to ask for that. If the purpose of your activation, we'll call it, is to gather information, excuse me, text messaging may be a better approach in some of those situations. With text messaging, you do get the user's cell phone number, and you are able to establish a two-way communication with them through text messaging. So you do get some additional information. If that's what you're trying to do, is get information from someone who's viewing a print advertisement, text messaging may be a better solution. With QR codes or any other 2D barcodes, you don't get the user's information by default. You have to ask for that separately. Let me look for one more here. I'm trying to scroll back to the top in case I missed any. Sorry, just reading through some of these. Here's a good one to end on, actually. The question is, do I think we'll see large corporations pushing the technology and educating the public on its applications and uses. I definitely do think that's already happening. Even over the past 6 months, I've been amazed at how much I've seen QR codes appearing within consumer publications. And I'm going to focus more on consumer, even though this is a B2B conversation today, because that's where awareness is probably going to be generated from. B2B customers are consumers part of their lives, so getting them awareness for QR codes and 2D barcodes in general can happen at the consumer level. Some of the biggest users of QR codes right now are Best Buy and Home Depot. If you look in the Sunday flyer, the FSI for Best Buy, on almost any Sunday, you'll see QR codes on probably half the pages that either take you to a video about a product or a mobile site with more information about it. They've also started putting QR codes in their retail environment so that if you're standing in front of a product, you can learn more information about the product and see online ratings for the product. So that they're definitely a company I would label as an advocate for QR codes. Home Depot has really started using them heavily too, almost just in the last 2 or 3 months. They've started putting them within print advertising, but they're also using them in store to provide more information. And it's just a great use of the technology because, I mean, I know when I'm in Home Depot, I'm always, trying to learn more about the plant I might be buying and what some of the maintenance needs are for that, or looking, comparing products that I may not be able to tell the difference between from the, the hang tag that's available. Letting me see a video about the drill that I'm looking at or see customer testimonials about that is a great way to win me over for a certain product line. So those are 2 companies that are, I would say, very heavily invested in QR right now, but they're just showing up everywhere. I'm seeing it more and more on packaging as well. I'm trying to remember, it was a restaurant I was at just the other day and saw QR codes on the drinks themselves, the cup that you use at the fountain. So definitely a lot of opportunity there for seeing QR codes. I definitely think the industry is very much publishing them. So I'm going to wrap up our Q&A with that one. I really appreciate everyone's time today, and I'm going to pass the microphone back over to John here to wrap things up.
Thanks, Scott. It amazes me every time I talk with you. I learn something new. For those who may have additional questions, again, Scott's email and phone number as well as mine are up there. If you want to have additional questions or you're thinking about some sort of a project, please keep us in mind. We appreciate that. And thank you very much for your time today. This concludes the webinar. Have a great day.